and different brain signals can be used for BCIs. Those are mostly non-invasive measurements of electrical brain activity, so-called EEG, electroencephalography, which is done by placing electrodes on the user's scalp in a form of some caps like this. But also invasive techniques can be used for BCIs by placing electrodes below the skull, on top of the brain, or even inside the brain tissue, or other measures like near-infrared spectroscopy, which measures blood flow, can be used also for this purpose. Regarding the application areas of this technology, it is still mostly constrained to the basically aim of helping people with neurological disorders, and mostly it is meant for severely disabled people, like patients suffering from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or spinal cord injury, or for rehabilitation after stroke. But current directions and novel directions also try to utilize this technology in enhancing some functions in healthy population. And also these devices can be a powerful tools for research of brain functions. Regarding the link between human factors and ergonomics field and field of BCI, this is a two-way link between those two areas. If you can imagine one brain-computer interface systems based on its elements, you can conclude these are very complex systems that involve measurements of electrophysiological signal from the user, and also some devices which are being controlled by those brain signals. So they involve this human-machine interaction in a very complex manner. So you can imagine that in design of such devices, human factor and ergonomics play a very important role in envisioning those such systems. And factors like comfort, so physical comfort, safety, electrical safety, for example, are very important. Then usability, user experience, and reliability of such systems, also possibilities of integration into daily life of patients or healthy users. Also, end user feedback is crucial in designing a good quality BCI system. So mostly iterative design based on user feedback is employed. Also, you can imagine there are a lot of ethical issues, such as privacy of the data, security, user information, obtaining consents, and so on. But also the field of BCIs, BCI technology influences the field of human factor and ergonomics. And these are the new emerging areas of neuroergonomics, where we use this technology to more precisely assess and quantify brain functions in different ergonomic conditions. And I will list here some examples. So, for example, you can, using BCI devices, assess mental workload or cognitive demand fluctuations during some sort of engagement. Then you can analyze cognitive tasks, so you can determine neural correlates of attention, memory, decision making under different ergonomic conditions. Then you can assess stress, emotions, then individual differences and acceptance of certain scenarios. Then you can test usability of other devices or conditions. So, for example, frustration, confusion, user satisfaction, and safety. For example, you can monitor drowsiness or fatigue to avoid work-related safety hazards. I will give one example how the human factor and ergonomics field have influenced over the years the field of BCI. So first, BCI system starting from 70s to the, let's say, late 90s have been mostly based on the clinical EEG setups. And in the clinical EEG setups, we have such caps with electrodes. Conductive gel is used for obtaining good connection of the with the skin and electrode. So basically, decrease of impedance of the skin electrode junctions. Then in a lot of those systems, many electrodes are used, up to 128. In some systems, those are bulky systems of big size. They are static, so they usually cannot be moved. And the electrodes are connected with the amplifier with wires. So basically, these are setups that are usually placed in one room where the recordings are being done. So some flaws of such setups is that for such large number of electrodes and conductive gel being used, we need long setup time. Then you have this gel in the hair. You need to wash your hair immediately after such recordings. These are often unsuitable for many real-life applications, so out of the clinic, out of the lab. These systems can be quite uncomfortable due to large number of electrodes, and but they obtain good signal quality, so the best one that can be measured with EEG. And such BCIs, since the results are obtained in the controlled laboratory setups, they have good accuracy. Then the field is shifting more towards having different type of electrodes which are more user-friendly. So now we have companies have developed dry EEG electrodes that do not require conductive gel. Also, the systems, the EEG devices which are used for BCI are compact, miniaturized, even concealed, so they can be a part of garments, caps, hats. They can record EEG in the surfaces where there is no hair. So, for example, on the forehead or around the ears. Here is one picture of the latest Apple patent. So these are earbuds that have EEG, envisioned EEG electrodes. So to record EEG from inside the ear, which is already validated technique. So, some benefits of using these kind of systems is much shorter setup time, less electrodes, dry electrodes, so you don't need conductive gel. They can be acquired even from hair-free zones. Uh, they are suitable for dynamic research studies, for outdoor applications, for home environment. They are more comfortable, but it's a trade-off. So usually they have lower signal quality and consequently less reliable BCI control. In designing BCIs, we need to identify those trade-offs and conduct some sort of cost-benefit analysis. And this is actually the area of human factors and ergonomics. And what are the usual trade-offs in designing BCIs? It is accuracy versus speed. So basically, the systems which are more accurate are usually slower because you need to acquire more data in order to have a more accurate decision, while faster systems make more mistakes. They can be invasive versus non-invasive. It's a clear, let's say, there are clear costs and benefits of from those two approaches. Then there is a trade-off between comfort and signal quality. Comfort related to type of electrodes, dry versus gelled, and number of electrodes. Then portability versus complexity, usability, adaptability versus calibration time. So sometimes or most often you need to calibrate the device before each use. And then this also implies the trade-off between generalization and personalization of the device. You can try to make the device as general as possible, for example, apply some transfer learning, but then there are user-specific brain patterns that can only be addressed and recognized by personalization. And each application of the BCI has its own requirements related to these trade-offs, and actually human factor and ergonomics area and research help us in defining these paths for specific application area. And now I will present some examples on what are the specific applications and specific requirements which can actually vary a lot depending on the application, even if it's in the same domain. And I will here present two different types of clinical applications that differ a lot based on their specific ergonomic and human factor requirements. So first, I will explain the basic concept of one brain-computer interface system for rehabilitation after stroke. So imagine this is a stroke patient's head with a lesion in the motor cortex as a result of stroke. And for example, this lesion is in the hand area, so the patient has an impaired hand function. If we collect EEG data around the lesion, so in the healthy brain tissue around the lesion, and if we can detect if the person tries to move the affected limb, so for example, to open or close the hand, and if we detect this from the EEG around the lesion, we can use this signal to trigger the device that will move the hand. So that actually imagination or attempt of the movement will produce the actual movement. For this, we can use, for example, some robotic device or electrical stimulation of the muscles. And this artificially produced movement uh, gives afferent, so sensory stimulation that goes back to the cortex. And this is, so we have functional and temporal synchronization of brain command and sensory consequence. So basically, we have a temporal synchronization between a will to move and artificially generated movement. And this is the basis of sensory motor integration or neuroplasticity. This is how our neurons learn to connect and reconnect basically after injury. Uh, so you can see here on the bottom right corner, it's one system, recovery system by GTEC company from Austria for stroke rehabilitation that uses EEG and electrical simulation and virtual reality that basically provides this sort of therapy. And from the picture, you can see it's a fixed setup. So it's conducted in the clinical setting as a part of the rehabilitation treatment. So the patient sits, looks at the screen, has EEG cap on, and if you can imagine, there we don't have requirements for high mobility, but we have requirements of precise, basically speedy system that is able to detect users' intention very rapidly in order to provide the expected feedback, because this is how this system works, and this is how it induces those plastic changes in the brain, and this is the basis of its function. On the other hand, we have other clinical applications or other applications in the domain of uh, helping neurologically disabled patients. And these are so-called assistive applications where BCI is not meant to improve the function, it is meant to replace the function. And you see here the severely disabled patient, a woman, and she's using BCI to control a robotic arm in order uh, to feed herself. Here you can see also a robotic brain-controlled robotic arm holding an egg. So you can imagine that this needs to be very precise type of control. Also here you can see an attempt of using EEG to control wheelchair or for spelling applications. Basically, a person imagines speech and then it is recognized and um, recreated by the BCI system, or assistive BCI for gait in spinal cord injury. So here you can see that in some of these applications, you need systems that are portable, and in the speed versus accuracy trade-off, you can imagine, for example, here for controlling a robotic arm, it is crucial that the system is accurate. Otherwise, it would be very frustrating for the patients because it will not do its expected function. I will tell a little bit about BCIs for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, because these are still the main target for clinical population of BCI users. ALS is a neurodegenerative disease of motor neurons. It is progressive. So it's a progressive loss of motor functions, so voluntary movement of limbs, speech, and even breathing in the last phases of the disease. So it leads to so-called locked-in syndrome, where complete paralysis it can lead to complete paralysis or complete absence of voluntary muscle control. These patients end up on mechanical ventilation, and they are completely unable to communicate with the external environment while being cognitively intact. So this is a devastating state. And I will tell you about one project, one study where I was involved. So it's a remap project of Danish Innovation Fund. And this is the BCI system, which is envisioned to be used first in the earlier stages of the disease, where the patient has affected function but not complete lack of function. And since those loss of function starts usually distally, so from hands and feet, we aimed to use the BCI controlled assistive robotic glove, so where a person imagines or attempts to do the grasping movement, and it triggers closing of this glove in order to assist a grasping. But actually, what the system does in parallel, it creates a huge database of brain signals and tracks the progression of the disease. So when the patient, it should assist patient more and more depending on his or her current state. And when the person reaches the locked-in stage, it should completely so those signals should be available for training the classifiers and machine learning algorithms that will be used then for communication instead of assistance. Regarding the influence of the BCI field on the field of human factors and ergonomics, this is the domain of so-called passive BCI. So passive BCI involves BCI methods to enrich human-machine interaction using implicit information on the actual user's state. So active BCIs, like the previous applications that I mentioned, they used basically users' will, users' intention to trigger some command of the device, while the passive BCIs, they, as the name says, they passively measure correlates of users' mental, physical, emotional state and make certain actions and decisions based on it. And here I listed some applications of passive BCI that can directly influence the field of ergonomics. So, for example, detection of cognitive fatigue in work environments, or detection of stress or cognitive fatigue, and such passive BCIs can, for example, trigger when the stress is detected, it can trigger some interventions like breaks during work or relaxation exercises. They can detect emotions or emotional responses to products or media content. They can monitor the state of the user, for example, while driving, so detect signs of drowsiness, distraction, to provide automatic alerts to the user in order to avoid safety hazards. Then They can assess user experience in media consumption. So assess engagement while watching videos, playing video games, or any interaction with digital media. Uh, they can be used in learning environments, so to monitor cognitive load during educational activities or to optimize this instructional material by adapting to the user's cognitive state. They can be applied in neuromarketing research, so to assess responses to advertisements, product design, packaging, and so on. They can be used to monitor sleep patterns, even to enhance memory consolidation during sleep. Uh, they can be used generally to enhance human-machine interaction by online adaptation of the behaviors of smart devices based on users' attention, engagement, stress, and so on. Or we can create some sort of alarms. So, for example, epilepsy alarms to predict epileptic seizures during tasks or conditions where losing control due to attack can be a huge safety risk. I will present in my last slide one small study that I have done in this domain. My BCI research was mostly focused on clinical applications, and this is, let's say, my trip into this field of neuroergonomics. So this was within the BrainWatch project, a smaller scale project from a bigger EU grant shop for CF, and partners were robotics department from our school and company Galeb Electronics, which are one of the regional leaders in production of fiscal devices. And they had these challenges of laborious assembly task of different electronic fiscal devices, and they wanted us to help them to provide some solutions for this problem. So worker fatigue during long repetitive laborious assembly task. Uh, so we have designed this neuroergonomic platform, which comprised EEG by this smart headphones device by Embrain Train company. Also collaborative robot, some graphical user interfaces, some other sensors, and basically this was envisioned as a worker-centric solution for small batch production and in order to increase productivity, to decrease number of faulty products, and to overall increase worker satisfaction by tracking some indexes of cognitive load and integrating this information into the process. So this is just one example of how we can integrate the BCI methods into a real factory environment. And this is all from my side. And thank you for your attention. And I would like to give you an opportunity to start the discussion and maybe answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrej. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's very interesting and a lot of applications there. Is there any questions from the public?
So first, I hope you heard me well. I see some questions about. So was the sound good throughout the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we could hear you well throughout the whole presentation.
Okay.
Okay, if there is.
Bojana has a question.
Yeah.
Hi again. Andrej, could you just tell us which mental workload metrics did you use in this scenario, the last one that you presented?
Well, we used since we had a low subject count here, we didn't have an opportunity really to explore many different subject-specific indices. So we used the very basic ones which are known in the literature. So this theta alpha ratio, this engagement index. So these are the ones that gave us some differences between the conditions. But so usually in my experience and from what I've explored generally, you can have mostly two types of indices of cognitive state, and these are the ones based on the frequency analysis, so on the power of different EEG bands and their ratios. And if you have such setup where you have clear distinct events on which user somehow reacts, so either actively or passively, you can use an ERP approach also to assess some aspects of cognitive processing during the task. In this case, since we did not have, it was a continuous task, we can only employ those indices based on the frequency content of the ongoing EEG. So these power ratios.
Oh yeah. I mean, definitely they're so famous in the literature. The classical mental workload index is taken like theta over alpha, and that kind of stuff is taken almost like a holy Bible in neuroergonomics and everything. But I'm just wondering, was it reliably useful in this scenario? Just because for my project, my own project, where I'm trying to find some kind of indicators for the real-time assessment of attention of a user, their level of attention. And we did explore these engagement index, mental workload index, beta over alpha, and so on. But none of them really seem to match the attention. And I know in some of your previous slides, which by the way are very, very nice, and thank you so much for the presentation. I forgot to ask, I was so excited to ask the question. I forgot to say, thank you so much. It's a brilliant presentation. So in one of the previous slides, you also mentioned somewhere that we can measure users' engagement and attention. But I'm just wondering, are we like, is it really doing that? Or yeah, I think it's in somewhere there. Yeah, probably. Yeah, enhanced human-machine interaction based on users' attention or engagement level. The engagement level, I presume, would be something like the engagement index. But I'm just wondering, are there any actual, until now, used metrics for attention?
Well, it depends highly on the context. So basically, these are still, even though, for example, those ratios are already, as you said, quite established. They are established in certain contexts, certain scenarios, and certain tasks. But for them to really become a gold standard, it needs to be validated in a much broader scope. So where I was most skeptic about this setup is because this is an assembly task, which actually involves movement, and the movement affects those brain frequencies, and the appearance of a certain rhythm in each area of the brain has different functional significance, electrophysiological basis behind it. So it is not such a clear task. Even, for example, if we completely constrain or focus on just a motor activity, for example, the movement of the arm, and imagining the movement of the arm, and even just touching the arm, will induce almost the same changes in the EEG frequency content. This just tells you that basically those processes are very dependent on the context. So being able to detect something or some sort of ratio measure during just thinking or doing cognitive task or motor task is completely different approach. So my conclusion is these indexes needed to be validated in this setup, and not so we cannot in such a new experiment use them as a gold standard, but we need to first validate them, and then if the approach is validated, and if we really show that those indexes correlate significantly with some measure that we know it's either some self-reported measure or some other behavioral measure of performance or workload. If we show those correlations, then we can proceed to really use them as a means for in some practical application. So this was a research study, and we have in a small sample showed that there are definitely some correlation between some of the indexes and some of the self-reported measures, but I still think there is a long way from research to really use those measures in real life applications, and we need to really specifically adapt them according to the context. The same goes for ERP measures. While ERP measures, in my opinion, are, let's say, more reliable, more repetitive, and let's say more validated. So you can find a lot of evidence in the literature, for example, that certain ERP component in certain condition should have some, let's say, range of amplitudes or latencies in a certain brain area, while for the frequency content is much more variable, and these are mostly relative measures because those signals vary much more in individual subjects than ERP measures do. So hopefully I wasn't too confusing, and I answered.
Absolutely. No,
your
thank you
question.
so much. I wish I could cite you in my thesis, because this is really what I needed to hear for my own research, because I was afraid, there is on one hand like this, a lot of research showing the usefulness of these tools, of these indices, etc. But on the other hand, when we want to push them to really like more naturalistic settings, there is not such a transferability. So this gives me great comfort. So thank you so much for this explanation.
Yeah, no problem. It's not such an optimistic view, but I think it's a relevant one, or at least to know what we should consider when we try to apply those. Okay, Carlo,
Thank you. Yeah.
I see a hand raised.
Yes, Andrej. Thank you so much for this interesting presentation. I had two questions, but I go with the first that is more important also for my research, and also it's something that I still lack for to have a knowledge about it. Do you think about, for example, this this scenario, these experiments? Do you think that the time on analysis affects the mental workload, the metrics that you can get from the EEG? And also, do you think that after a certain time, do you think that it's possible to have a sort of reliability of the metrics that you can get from this analysis? How long? I don't know. For how long did you conduct these experiments? How long did the participant assemble the task? I don't know.
Well,
I don't know if you can answer me. Don't worry. I mean, it's just. I mean, just if time can affect the.
Yeah. So I think I will give very speculative answers, which I don't like. And so my general answer is I do not know for sure, but my what is definite, so that this will and this should change in time. And if there is a change in users' cognitive state, so for example, if you have a scenario which is actually used to induce some sort of fatigue, uh, you should definitely see some change in those indices. And what you can do is that you can track those changes along with users, let's say, self-reports, which can be very simple. You don't have to do the whole this NASA test. You can do just a small report on a certain factor which you think will change during time, and then to correlate those indices with those values. So this is one way to assess this. But I am but this will vary a lot depending on your scenario, on your application, whether it induces physical fatigue, whether it induces whether the conditions are stressful, where you have some time constraints, or they are just boring. So I expect definitely those indices to change, and you can depending on the type of your analysis, you can find, let's say, some mean value over the condition in order to somehow compensate or to ignore those changes during the which occur during the condition. But you can also include this in your analysis. So for example, you can observe trends of certain parameter, whether it's an increasing, decreasing trend, and compare those trends between conditions. So I think it's a matter of what you want to explore. But I would definitely expect those to change and to vary not just between conditions, but also during the condition, if the task is long enough so that you expect that it's not stationary task, but it has some fluctuations in time. But
Okay.
usually in EEG experiments, you consider a single condition like it's a stationary task, and you compensate for those changes which happen by averaging. So this is how you usually approach the analysis. But if it's a best model, I'm sure it's not.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
But if you have a more specific question, I think you ask how long were our experiments. They were, I think, 10 to 15 minutes per condition.
Okay.
So, and by interviewing the participants, we also asked them this. So did the task itself, its duration, induce any fatigue? And they say no. But I'm sure if the task lasted for 45 minutes, the answer would be different.
Of course, also for the fatigue itself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other question for Andrej? Okay, if not, we may close this webinar. Thank you very much, Andrej, for your interesting presentation. Hopefully, there is more. Can you share with us your email if anyone is interested in your research and they want to contact you?
Yes, it's on my first slide.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my email. Be free to contact me, and yeah, hopefully this is also just a start of some interesting collaborations on those topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining, and we see you on our next Launch and Learn webinar. Thank you very much, and thank you, Andrej, again for your presentation.
Thank you
See you next
again.
time.